Hey guys, this is Fletch, and this is meant to be a quick tutorial, for quickly jumping from Blender into Cinema 4D. Now, the word "quick" I use as a euphemism because Cinema 4D is quite different from Blender. However, the functionalities in Cinema 4D and Blender are very similar. So almost anything you do in Blender, you can do in Cinema 4D. But this is just going to be about the interface. So here we go. Cinema 4D, I'm not going to talk about all the parts just exactly yet. But the main challenge you're going to have is navigating in Cinema 4D. And this took me a long time to get used to. You hold down the Alt key, and then you your left click. If you're holding down the Alt key and you left click, that's your orbit. And it orbits around the center of the scene, but sometimes it orbits around something that's in the scene. So let me try to open a scene here. Let's see. And I haven't been able to figure out exactly how this works, but if you have something selected and you try to orbit, I don't know, it doesn't, I don't know, it's weird. It's orbiting it's just orbiting about the middle of the screen, but you can change that to orbit around your cursor. Wherever you click in the screen, it will orbit about that center as opposed to the thing. Now, I don't remember where that's located at, but probably under like options, configure, maybe it's in there. So you can feel free to explore that later. Okay, so your main is Alt and left click, that's orbit. Alt and middle mouse button click, that's pan. Alt and right mouse click, that's zoom in and out. Okay, so you have to hold the Alt key to do those, which is really annoying. The other option is to use these little tiny icons up here, but I have a hard time grabbing those, and of course it's really slows down your workflow when you use them, but they're over here. So if you click and hold this and then you drag around, it'll work the same way. There's your click and zoom and click and rotate, so they're there. But just hold your Alt, and then again, left is orbit, right middle mouse button is pan, right mouse button is zoom in and out. Now, in Cinema 4D, you've got this list of objects here, and let's look at building something in Cinema 4D. In Cinema 4D, you've got your objects to place. In Blender, you would hit Shift A, but in Cinema 4D, you come up to this menu here, and you can input any of these objects. Now, these objects are, let's, I don't know, typical cube or whatever, but let's go to cube here, and we'll zoom out. Oh, by the way, if you hit S, it'll zoom to your selected object. S will zoom to your selected object. And if you hit 1, the 1 on your numpad and the 1 on your keyboard right above the Q, if you have a QWERTY keyboard, the number 1, and you left click, it's also pan. 2, left click is zoom in and out. 3, I'm holding down 3 and left clicking, and it's orbit. So there's another option for your zooming and whatever, but I suggest you get used to the Alt key left for orbit. That's going to be your most commonly used navigation thing. All right, so you'll notice that when I popped this object in, up in the upper left-hand corner, it has this make editable thing. So before I push this button, if I just pop in an object, it is a parametric object. So I can move it around with this axis, but if I can just get it to grab that little square there, yeah, you can change the size of it using these little squares. Now, Cinema 4D has a bad habit of making all their icons like super duper tiny. I have no idea why. It's very annoying. If they would just make that a little bit bigger, it wouldn't bother anybody and you could actually grab it and do something, but no, you got to be very careful and precise. Anyway, over here, oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm not in standard view. I think when you open Cinema 4D, it's going to be a standard setup. So this is your standard view. And then if you make any changes to how the standard view works, you can save that. You go into Window, Customization, Save Layout As, and then you can rename it. And then after you save that file, now you can find it in the list, and I made one, my basic startup profile here. but I'll go through that real quick. Anyway, so this object in Blender, you would hit Tab to go in to edit that object, but not in Cinema 4D. In Cinema 4D, to go in to edit that object, you would hit Enter. But in this case, when I hit Enter, it doesn't work because it's a parametric object. So first you have to make it editable. So let's click on this cube here, and here it's telling me the size. And I can also see that size down here. But if I change the size here, and I say 300, for instance, and hit Enter, it's going to change them all in proportion to that size. If I say, if I type in 1M, it'll make it 1 meter, but it's going to change everything in proportion. I'm still keeping the other sizes the same. And that's because it's a parametric thing. I can click and drag, click and hold and on one of these buttons, and it'll slowly go up and down. Or I can click and drag and it'll, just like in Blender, it'll go up and down. But also, this is important. If you hold the Shift key down and you click the up or down arrow, it'll move in increments of 10. If you hold the Control key down, it moves in increments of 1. And if you hold the Alt key down, it moves in increments of 1/10. Whereas in Blender, you would be able to just hold the Shift key and change the speed of the change to be more finite or brutto, whatever you want to call it. So that's how you do it in Cinema 4D. Again, Shift for 10s, Control for change in 1, and Alt for change in 0.1. If you need something very fine, you can type in 0.001 or whatever, obviously. So let's put this. Also, if you're in the X and you type 1 meter and hit Enter, then you can't go to the next field. You got to click in the next field. But if I type in 1M and hit Tab, then I can get 1M Tab, 1M Tab. That's the quickest way to go in between all of those different options. Now, if you've put in the cube and it defaults with 20 segments, which I think it normally does, and then you change it to 1 segment, which I just did just now, it will have just 1 segment. But I'll show you what 20 segments looks like. Here we go. And then we hit the Make Editable button, or the shortcut C on your keyboard. Then you've got those 20 subdivisions. So segments on these objects is subdivisions. So I'm going to set it to 1. And I'm going to hit C for Make Editable. And now when I hit the Enter key, it'll go into edit mode. So instead of Tab, you hit Enter. Tab for Blender, going into this mode. Now you've got the point mode, line mode, or polygon mode here, the point line plane. The quickest way to switch between those is to hit the Enter key again. So every time you hit the Enter key, it'll go to the next one. And it just goes round robin. So I'm in points, line, face, point, line, face, point, line, face. So if you get used to doing that, it's a quick way of navigating between them without having to come over and click. But I know people will just come over and click. Now, for your selection mode is right here. They call it live selection. And if you hold the middle mouse button down and drag while the mouse button is down, it'll make your selection circle bigger or smaller. But if you just middle click in the window, it will jump to this 4 view mode. So why is it not showing up? I just froze up. All right, so here we go. I'm in startup. What happens in standard mode? Standard mode looks similar to startup. So I'm going to open that file up real quick. We're going to place a cube. Hit S to zoom out to it. Hit C to convert it, and hit Enter to go into edit mode. And again, click middle mouse button and drag. Make sure live selection circle bigger or smaller. So now, when you paint with that, then it'll select whatever is inside there. A difference with the window select tool. Okay, you can go back and forth between live select and window select by the 0. 0 is window select, and 9 is live select. 0, window select. And then why doesn't that work? Okay, so if I click here, Now we have our front view. You can see right here it tells you front view, right view, top view, perspective view. If I pop in a cube, there we go. If I hit C to convert it, hit enter to go into edit mode, and I use 9 to get into live selection, I can select that corner. Now we can see that that's that point in the plan view, and this in the side view, in the right hand view, that's that one. So it's weird because their perspective view opened in a weird orientation, but okay. I would have expected it to be the front view like this, but all right. So obviously you can just use the gizmo to move stuff. In Cinema 4D, the quickest way to start modeling would be to use the what they call the polygons mode, what I would call the face mode. And you can hold control down, and when you hold control down and drag, this is more important. Move, scale, and rotate. In Blender is obviously with the different keys, but here the shortcut keys are E, R, T. So E is move, R is rotate, and T is transform tool or a scale tool. So E for move, R, and T. And if you use those in conjunction with control, you can actually build fairly quickly. So if I'm in the E mode, which is the move mode, and I hold control down, and I move this up, drag this up, now it's going to extrude that. Okay. Now if I use the T mode and I hold control down and I drag this down, it doesn't do anything. But if I drag here, it will do an inset. And then I move back, then I hit E again, I'm back in move mode, and I hold control down, I can build like this. Okay, so T, hold control down, click on this one, inset. Okay, and now I'm gonna click here, but you could also just hit 9 to go back into select object mode. You can do that, then you hold the Alt key down and click left and drag to orbit. And I'm letting go of the Alt key, and holding Shift key I can add to my selection. Hold Shift key only adds, it doesn't subtract. But if you want to subtract from your selection, hit Control, just like in most programs. So Control. And now if I right click, you'll get a bunch of your tools. They're not showing up for you because now I'm on my second monitor here. Oh, and Cinema 4D is going to be funny with this now. Cinema 4D doesn't like 2 monitors. What's going on? Oh boy. Cinema 4D doesn't like 2 monitors. Flip. Okay, so I realized that if you are in startup mode, it only gives you file and customization pull down menus. So you definitely want to use standard mode to start out with to learn Cinema 4D. Now I finally got this thing, this recorder working on my main screen, so I'm going to go back to this view. We're going to hit, you have to, oh, by the way, like I can't select anything even though I'm in face mode, and that's because I haven't selected my object, and this is a problem I keep running into with Cinema 4D. I often either have the wrong object selected, or actually if you click and start dragging this down, and then hold Control, you can duplicate your object. And now if I have 2 objects selected, you can often run into problems if you have 2 objects selected. It just works weird. So this has happened to me several times. If I have 2 objects selected, now this little location, I don't know what this little window is called, this object location thing and axis thing down here, isn't available. So if you have 2 selected, if you see that this is grayed out down here, that means you have 2 objects selected up here. So click on the object you want to edit, and now you can change the position of it. So now if I were to hit Control A to select everything, it shows me sizes, and I could change, say 400, and it'll change the size of that thing. So also you can't quick hide an object in Cinema 4D, which is annoying. In Blender, I would just hit H to hide an object. I think it is H to hide an object in Blender. It is in SketchUp. Well, I don't know, whatever you have set up. In Cinema 4D, if I want to hide an object, which in this case I'm going to hide the main cube that I've got right now. So I click on that first time, it shows me a green light. And if I click it a second time, it'll show me a red light. And that means it's hidden. But here I've got this cube, which isn't red lighted. So I'm going to click this twice to get it to go away. And I'm going to click this once to get it to show back up. So you can quickly hide your object only that way. You can't use a shortcut as far as I know. There might be a way for you to customize their shortcut there, which I highly suggest to do if you can. Anyway, that's how you hide objects. It's annoying, but there you go. Now, I'm going to center mouse click in this view, go to this view here so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to select this face, and if I want to, there are green modifiers and blue modifiers in Cinema 4D. The green modifiers, the way modifiers work is a little bit different than in Blender, but you can stack modifiers just like you can in Blender. Here's your basic modifier subdivision surface. If you click and hold, you can see the other modifiers. There doesn't appear to be many, but these are like form modifiers, I guess you could call them, you know, your shape modifiers or something, loft and sweep and subdivision surface. And then the other modifiers are listed here, like array and connect and symmetry and all those things. They're in here. So if I have an object, let's go back into object mode. I'm going to click on this, modeling mode, what Blender would call object mode. If I'm in modeling mode and I hold the Alt key down and I click on subdivision surface modifier, it will add the subdivision surface modifier to my cube. If I click on this little check mark, I can hide that modifier. I can temporarily disable that modifier while I'm working on it. All right. So now if I click my cube and not the subdivision surface, if I click my subdivision surface, I can change how many subdivisions there are, and this can change in the renderer or just the editor, just as in Blender, works the same way. I think if I hit Q, yeah, Q disables the modifier real quick, so you don't have to go over there and push that little button there. You can just hit Q while you're working. You can edit by going back to your cube object. You can hit enter to jump in. I'm going to expand this view out by center clicking on my mouse. And then I hit enter to go back into it. And then I hit 9 and I middle mouse click. I can expand my circle select for live select, 9 for live select, 0 for window select. I can hit enter again, and now I'm in selection of edge mode. If I hit enter again, hit 9, I can select a face. If I hit shift, I can select 2 faces. If I hit enter again, I'm back into points mode, and it's still showing that point that I selected before. If I were to select this point now, hit enter, it'll show that each of those objects is still selected in the different modes that, and I believe it works the same way in Blender. If I am in points mode like this and I want to do a loop cut, I can't do it. I have to go into face mode. If I hit enter twice to get into face mode and I hit double K, it'll give me a knife mode. And if I use knife on it, it will cut the object. Now I'm going to hold Alt and left click to rotate around, and you can see it didn't cut all the way through the object. I'm going to Control Z that. Now here's your mode over here for the knife tool, and you can go down to loop tool, and then you can hover and it will place a loop. Once you click once to place the loop, now this offset doesn't seem to do anything. I don't know what it's there for, but there's your loop mode, and look at that, it only works on the selected faces. So if I hit 0 for window select and click away from my object, it should deselect. It's not deselecting. Okay, I had to make a window to deselect. So if you have something selected and you make a window away from it, it'll deselect. If I have something selected in live mode select, I could just click away and it'll deselect. So that's how you deselect. Now if I don't have anything selected, I hit double K for a loop select. It's still in loop mode like it was before. And now if I click on that, let's see what it does. Ooh, that is weird. Why is it doing that? Oh, that's because it went from this relative position on that edge to the same relative position but on this bigger edge. So I'm going to hit Control Z a couple of times here and get back into... by the way, it's not Shift Control Z to undo. Shift Control Z undoes your camera move. Shift Control Z undoes your last camera move. Control Y will redo. Control Z undoes. Okay, Control Y to redo. And now I'm going to click away from, hit 9 and click away to deselect. And I'm going to hit double K to loop cut. And now it'll loop cut around the whole object. Now I believe if you, in newer versions of Cinema 4D, you can scroll your mouse wheel and it gives you more options for loop cutting, but it's a pretty dumb loop cut, I would say, compared to Blender. You can get a really nice loop cut in Blender, but there you go, there's your loop cut. So I'm going to hit Q while I'm working because I want to see my object and I want to add this loop cut here, and now we can see the subdivision object updating. We'll need a loop cut here to tighten that up. We need a loop cut here to tighten that up. And now you can see the advantage of being able to hit Q to enable or disable your subdivision surface mode. Now if I hit 9 and hit enter, I'm in until I get to face mode. Now I can select that face and I can hit T for scale, Control, and now if I don't select anything of those points or dots or anything, and I just click anywhere in the view, I'm holding Control down, I'm in scale mode, and I just click and drag, it will give me my extrude inset. So I'm going to hit Q, and I'll show you how I did that. Control Z to undo. Hit T to be in scale mode. Okay, so I'm in scale mode. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. I'm going to hold Control down, and I'm just going to click and drag off of my model, not so I'm clicking on any face, but I'm going to click and drag away from the model, and it will do an inset, extrude inset. So if we go here, it's all in the same plane still. I didn't push it down. Okay, so that's another thing. If you're in E for move, and then you hold Control and you click anywhere, you don't have to click here. Click anywhere, but now it's going to extrude it, but it's going to move in the direction of my mouse, which is not what I want. So in this case, I want to extrude on the Z-axis. I have to grab the Z-axis and drag it. Now, if you hold Control down while you're extruding and you hold Shift key, it will use what they call quantization. So now it's going in steps of 10, 20, 30. And quantization is the key to working with Cinema 4D and being accurate. So let's talk about quantization. They have snapping here, and then under snapping, if I click and hold this, you can see enable quantizing. So the shortcut keys for your snapping is Shift S. That enables snapping. The shortcut key for enable quantizing is Shift Q. But we're going to set up the palette so that we can see just the quantizing separately. So we're going to go to right click down on the empty area, and we're going to say customize palettes. We're going to go in this filter and we're going to type quant, and then we're going to drag these buttons down into here. So push until it shoves up against the bottom of that, drop that. So there's your enable quantizing button. And then we're going to, for the moves control steps, we're going to drag it over here on the right. Control rotate, we'll drag that on the right, and control scale, I'll drag that on the right. So we've got our move step, rotate step, and scale step. We're going to close this. Now when I hit Shift Q, you can see that this highlights or unhighlights, and now I know that that is on or off without having to open this up to see if it's on or off. Okay? So when I hit Shift S, it'll disable snaps. Shift Q enables quantizing without having snaps enabled. I don't know why they embedded quantizing in there, because it's sort of a separate function. Now when I select this face and I move it up or down, because quantizing is enabled, it's moving it in steps of 10 centimeters, and I can change that to just hit 1 and hit enter. Now it's in 1 centimeter steps. And now when I move it, you can see it's snapping to 1 centimeter. So when you're using it to build, you can quickly change the amount of steps. So if I wanted this to move, oh, that's interesting. If I want it to move in a different amount of steps, I can change that to 5 centimeters, and now it's moving in steps of 5. So if I hit R for rotate, it's set to 10 degrees right now. So as I rotate this thing, it's going to go in 10 degree steps. I find that 5 degrees steps is more useful for me. And I find that because I work in highly detailed work usually on small objects, that 0.1 centimeter is a great move step for me. But in this case, I'm going to set it to 5 centimeters because we're working on such a large object here. And then your scale step, I also find that to be useful to set to 5. So if I select a face and I want to extrude that face, I hit E to get into move mode, and I can move the face. I can hold Control and drag to extrude the face, and you can see now it's extruding in 5 centimeter increments according to the steps that we set there in quantizing. All right, so I'm going to hide. I'm going to hit Q to enable subdivision, and you can see how that's looking with subdivision surface on. We're going to hide the subdivision object, which actually hides the cube inside of it as well. And now we're going to talk about the pen tool. The pen tool works a little bit like Photoshop, but of course it's quirky. So if I go to, I'm going to click here to deselect everything. I'm going to click in that blank space in my list to deselect everything, and I'm going to click on the pen tool. And because I have quantizing enabled, we can set up options for the quantizing. Let's see, it's not snapping to the thing, and I would like to start this point on the axis, but it's not letting me do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, go to top view, and let's pretend I just wanted to get close and like snap to, oops, there it is, there's the blue and the red axis, and I wanted to snap to that axis there. So I go into snap, and I just enable snap, okay, right there. So you could enable it just by clicking on it. You can hit Shift S to enable it. And then under that, now it looks like vertex snap is enabled, but none of these are enabled. So I'm going to turn off vertex snap, and it's so dumb that it disappears on you, but okay. And I want to turn on axis snap. And then now when I click on it, if I get close enough to it, it will go to subdivision surface axis snap, and it's actually snapping to, I'm going to disable that. It's snapping to that axis. I'm going to delete that. Let's see what happens here. Let's see if it will snap. Yeah, now it's, oh, delete that. Let's see if it's going to snap to the axis. It's not. I want to snap to the world origin. Work plane snap? Nope. Disable that by clicking it again. Huh. 3D snapping? No. So I guess the quickest way to get it to snap to that would be to put in a dummy object and to disable it completely. And now it'll still snap to the origin. If I go to pen tool now and choose axis snap. No? It's not going to do it, huh? Okay, so I have to have that enabled. Why is it not working? Auto snap? Not doing it. Choose world. Not doing it. Okie doke. I'm going to hit Control Z and go back to my subdivision surface. So weird. Sorry about this, guys. Oh, why was Axis Snap like turned off? Why the heck was it turned off? Okay. Well, there you go. Axis Snap. So you have to have an object in, I guess, to freaking work the axis. And if you put any object in, it'll center it for you. So now it's at the right spot. So now I've got the pen tool, and I draw a second point, and I have 2 objects selected right now, so I don't have access to this right now. So I'm going to just select my spline, and now I can set this right. So as I draw a point, it'll tell me the position of that point. So if I wanted this at the 0, 0, I could go at 0, tab, 0, 0, tab, and hit enter, and it'll put it on the 0, 0. So that's another option. If you're starting, I Control Z'd and starting over. If I click here and I want that to be at 0, 0, click on spline, click in here and just hit 0, 0, 0 and hit enter. And make sure that you've set this to world. It defaults to object relative. Okay, so now I've got that working for me, and you can see because of quantizing, it's locking onto this axis. If I hit Shift Q and turn off quantizing, it doesn't lock onto anything, even with the snaps on, because I don't have snapping to objects. But even if you did, let's say I were to enable all of those. Another way to do it, I think, is V or V select, V snap. You can set them in there. You hit V and then you can go into these. So I've set all my snaps to be on, intersection snap, midpoint snap, all of those on. So all of those are enabled. But quantizing is not enabled, and you can see that it's not going on the axis. So it's not like in Cinema 4D and in Photoshop, you just hold Shift key and it'll lock it onto that axis you're closest to, which would be very nice, and I wish C4D would do that. It doesn't. So you hit Shift Q, you enable quantizing, and you set your rotate and scale and steps, and now you can draw very accurate with the pen tool. So if I click once and let go, it gives me a sharp point, just like in Photoshop. And if I click and drag, it'll give me a Bezier point. Click and drag, it gives me a Bezier point. Now, while that's working, if I go back and click on that first point, if I just select that point, I can actually drag this and it will quantize. Now, if I want that to be a sharp corner over here, but I want to control the angle of this tangent point, if you hold the Shift key down and then you drag, it will give you that sharp corner, so you can make something like this. If I'll hold Shift key down, there we go. So you can make that. All right, and then I'm going to click here, and instead of clicking to close, don't do that because it does weird stuff. What you do is choose Close Spline over here, Close Spline right there. All right, so here's our spline. Now I'm going to, I drew that in top view and I should have drawn it in front view. If you want to draw a shape, I'm going to take this. Okay. I'm going to draw a new spline. So I need to click away from that spline. I've got this pen tool activated. I'm going to draw a new spline. If I click here, now it says spline point 1. That means I'm drawing a new spline. And let's go into top view. Enable quantizing. How come quantizing doesn't seem to be working? Oh, it is. Okay. It is. We'll just do this like that. Okay, and now I'm going to hit escape. Instead of enter, you hit escape because they use enter to switch between these different editing modes. If I click object mode, now it's in this mode. And I can actually change the size of this object right here. If I change this to 2000, it will stretch it without changing the Z. And by the way, the other major difference is the Z in Cinema 4D is actually what is the Y coordinate in Blender. So when you're looking in plan view, or top view as they call it, this is your X and this is your Z axis. And then if you want to extrude it up, it's actually extruded up in the Y direction. So it's really confusing because they have it ordered as X, Y, Z, but actually Y is up in the what is Blender calling the Z axis. So anyhow, we've got this object, and now I want to extrude this profile along that line. And this would be like the follow me tool in SketchUp. It's called a sweep, and I believe it's called a sweep still in Blender. So you would create a sweep object, which you just select the object you want to use, either one of those, and you hold the, if they're green, you hold the Alt key. If they're blue, you hold the Shift key. So in green, I hold the Alt key. I'm holding Alt down, click here, and I choose sweep. Now it adds that sweep modifier to that spline. And we'll call this the rail because we want this to be the line that it follows. And the spline, we'll call that our profile that we want swept along that rail. And you want the profile to be on top of the rail but under the sweep. And now it's swept my profile along the rail. But you can see that it swept it in the wrong way. It's still flat. What it's doing is kind of dragging it along in that axis. So now what we have to do is change the axis of my profile. And that you use the axis tool, which they just added to Blender, but Cinema 4D has the axis tool. So what you do is you enable the axis. You're in object mode or model mode for your profile. You enable the axis. And now the ERT works, but it's actually converting or changing, transforming your axis, not the object. So I'm going to go into top mode. I'm in top view. I'm going to hit R for rotate. I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag, and it's going to go in 5 degree increments because we set that for our rotate steps, and go to 90. And now I dragged that down like that. So now I've changed the axis of my profile. And now if we look at this, it has swept that profile along that rail. Okay. There you go. Now, if we wanted that to happen on the other side of the line, if that should have been going on this side of the line instead of that side, what we'll need to do is rotate our axis again. We still have axis activated. Now we need to rotate it on the Z axis. So I'm going to rotate it like that. But now it's upside down, you say. Oh, okay, so now we need to flip it. So we rotate it 180 the other way. And now we have our profile swept along the line. But you say, I wanted it on top, not on the bottom. Well, now you have to go to, you hit E to move, and you can, that's not that one, not that one. It's this one. You have to find whichever one it is that changes. I don't know why that moves it up, but it does. So that's weird. I don't like that. So what I would do is go into point mode and look in plan view here. Hit 0 for your window select. Make sure you turn off the axis. We don't want to modify the axis anymore. What we want to do is move this up. I'm going to move it up to there. There we go. See how that worked? So I'm going to move it up to there. And now it's oriented correctly. It's following my rail. And it is working as the profile I intended it to be. I'm hovering over there. I'm not clicking in the thing. I'm hitting T for scale. Actually, I'm going to go to E for move. move the axis point over here. Okay, and it snapped because my snaps are enabled. And now I'm going to hit T for scale again, and I'm going to drag this down, and what I want to do is cut that. Oops, now I got to turn off axis, and now we're going to scale the objects about that point. Now I can scale the objects about that point, and that could be the skirt board for going around a room in architecture. All right, there you go. So that's how to work with a pen tool. You will have to practice that, but pen tool works great. Remember, Shift S to turn snaps on and off, Shift Q to turn quantizing on and off. You'll want to turn off quantizing sometimes to make small adjustments. But generally, I like quantizing because that's how you lock things in the X and Y axis, X, Y, Z axis. Otherwise, you can't lock anything X, Y, Z axis like you can in Blender or in SketchUp or in all the others. They all just default lock things in X, Y, Z axis, and Cinema 4D defaults to not having anything in X, Y, Z axis. Okay, let's pretend we wanted to build walls the way we would build a wall. We would use the parametric object. And by the way, if you want to make this thing bigger, I think you can do it under display. Let's see here, options, configure all, and view. Now, that's point size. That's not it. Select edge size. I don't know if they'll let me change that. Highlight outline. It's not letting me change it. If you're into the object, well, let's turn it to editable for a second, and we go to point mode. And then we go back to configure all. You can change these points sizes right here. Select point size. Point handle size, here we go. So you can make those bigger or smaller. I guess the maximum is 10. So set that, and then if you select an object, select a point, come on, 0 for window select, go back to options, configure all. Your selected point size you can change here. So turns out I kind of like 6. Here's your edge size. Doesn't look like you can change your edge size, but you can change your selected edge size. So I'm hitting 9 for live select. And then options configure as, you can change your selected edge size here as well. So there is a little bit of configuration ability, but looks like it's kind of limited. Whereas in Blender, literally everything is customizable in every which way. But there you go. At least you have something. Okay. So I'm going to Control Z all that. Control Y to get my object back. Now we're in parametric mode for this cube. So if I was going to build a wall, I would quickly grab it like that and do that and do that. And then I would click on my cube, and under object modes, there's basic coordinate object Phong. Go to object mode, and I can set my size. So walls should be 20 centimeters. And height of a wall typically is going to be between 265 and 330. And then I need a drink of water. So setting Y to, let's set it to 300. And then the length of the room, let's set a basic 8 meter. So 800 centimeter. Now, you cannot change the position of the axis for a parametric object. It doesn't allow you to do that. So if you're trying to change the axis and it won't let you do it, first you have to make it editable. So click that button or hit C. And now I can make it, I've made it editable, so I can enable the axis and I can move that axis down. And if I go into my front mode, it should, oh, Shift S to snap, so enable snaps, and now it's snapping to the edge. Now I have, go back, turn that moving axis, enable axis thing. Shortcut is L, by the way. You should learn that shortcut for L, because you'll find yourself moving the axis around on objects a lot, and it's handy to know that L is the shortcut. Although I will admit it's not a very handy shortcut. So now we're in plan view, and what you want to get used to working is to be in plan view, and here you can see it's snapping to the midpoint, and it tells you it's snapping to the midpoint of my swept object. So there it is. And now if I want to create another wall, quick way to do it would be just to control click drag on that cube, and we call this wall 1. So I double click on the name to change it, and we'll click on here and call it wall 2. Hovering over the thing, I didn't click in the view or anything, just hovering my mouse over the view, hit R for rotate, click and drag in on here. If quantizing is enabled, it should be snapping like that. You don't have to hold shift or anything. And then hit E for move. And then if I drag this over and I just hover over my object, you can see it'll snap onto the midpoint. Say sweep midpoint. Now, if I want to make this wall longer, I can do it right here. So I can click and drag this, but it won't live update. You don't see it updating. You have to hit apply, and then it will update. So we'll put 20 meters in there. If I hit enter, look at that. Okay. So now it's snapped before to the midpoint, but we don't actually want it necessarily snapping to the midpoint. Let's see what that looks like down here. Actually, that's pretty good. Yeah, okay. So what's nice about that is that the wall base is intersecting with the wall, and that's what you want. You don't want to have two surfaces share space in 3D coordinates. It causes errors in the render engine. So this is what we do. Now let's talk about viewport display. So we're going to right click on this. You can go here to display and turn on ground shading with lines, and it'll give you these lines here. But we're going to do what I like is customize palettes, and we're just going to type in shading. And now I can go ground shading with lines. And if you want it to look like SketchUp, grab this quick shading with lines. And if you want just, I don't know, the rest of them aren't very useful, I find, but you can grab any of those you want, any of these with these little orange icons. And now I can quickly switch between ground shaded edges with lines, and then just quick shading. And in this case, they're both the same, but they won't always be one, depending on your lighting setup. But it looks like there's not much difference between these two. Not in this scene anyway. Okay, one more thing about the pen tool. You can see here, we'll select, I'm going to hit 9. I'll select this object, this sweep. If you go to phone, maybe we do this without that. You can see it doesn't look that great. You can change this down. You can change this setting to be, this is smoothing everything. This is smoothing nothing. So 0 is no smooth. 180 is everything smooth. And the default was 60. I would set it to something like 40 maybe. Seems to look pretty good. Okay. But you can also go into your profile. I'm going to turn the lines back on here. If you look in your profile, you can set this angle, and this will increase. If I set it to 1, it'll increase the number of segments. If I set it to like 20, it decreases the number of segments in my spline. So each curve inside of that spline has a number of segments to it, and if you set it to 1 or even to 0, it'll make it like super smooth. So 0 gives you like the nicest, smoothest curves. Okay, so that's when I have profile selected, and probably want to do the same thing for rail. We'll set it to 1. So that would be how you set up the walls. And then since we have the walls positioned, I'm going to hold shift key with the live select, which is 9. Live select is active. Hold shift key, or just actually click and drag around. You can select them both. Now you'll see if we go to side view and you hit S to zoom out, it's showing the axis right there. And we want to position this so that the Y is set to 0. I'm going to hit 0, hit enter. And actually, we're going to add a floor. So we're going to just click that. I'm going to drag it to the middle. There's your wall axis snap. Then I'm going to drag this one to the wall axis snap. It's not working. But we know that it was 2000, so I'm going to set this to 1000. There we go. And then I'm just going to drag this and this. And I'm going past deliberately because we don't want these to share space with each other in 3D space. So then I'm going to set this to, let's say, 2010. Oh, maybe just leave it the way it was. And now I'm going to go back to these walls, and unfortunately what they are is they are intersecting. They might be. They're not, because the this plane is the box that we input is too high. It's a meter tall. And I would typically make the floor 20 centimeters like I did the walls. So actually what I'm going to do is go to the object, because this is still a parametric object. And we're going to set the Y, which is at 2 meters tall. We're going to set it to 20 centimeters thick. And we're going to set the position of that. Instead of being at 0, we're going to set it to -10. Then we're going to go to move the axis, but we can't move the axis on this, so we will. Okay, so we're going to convert it. Hit C or hit that button, and then we're going to use the axis tool. We've got our snaps enabled, and in snaps you've got all of these enabled, but you only need edge snap enabled. So again, I think it's the V button snap. You can turn off things like that. You can also change your selection type with that as well. So the V button. There's also an M. When you hit M, you get a bunch of stuff, and when you hit N, you get a bunch of stuff. So these are different. There's your different shadings there as well. If you don't want to make the little buttons on the left, you could use N key. And it'll allow you to switch between wireframe and whatnot. So you would hit N and then, for instance, B. So you would hit N, or wireframe is H. So if I hit NH, changes to wireframe, and B changes to ground, NH. And H is supposed to be wireframe, but it's not working because why? I have no idea. What in the world? Okay, well, I'm a noob in Cinema 4D as well, so I don't know what's going on. We're going to try in the front view since I don't know how to get that back now. It's not working. And you're just going to drag, set the axis. We've got snaps set to, we want edge snap on. We don't need any of the other ones on, so I'm going to turn those off. I'm going to leave midpoint and edge snap, and I'm going to leave auto snapping on. I think. Let's see here. Yeah, auto snapping is on. We're going to enable axis, and we're going to move the axis up to the top of the floor. So now it's at the top of the floor. Okay. and turn off axis and make sure that the floor is at 0, which it is. The floor is at 0 position for world. All right. And now what we want to do is grab these two walls. So I used the live selection tool and clicked and dragged across them. And I want to lower them down so that they're intersecting with the floor a little bit. And they are. This wall is 300 centimeters tall, but it's down by 10 centimeters, so it's actually only 290. So I would need to make it 310 so that it's 300 above the floor. Does that make sense? So this is 310, and it's scaling that according to that point that we set as the axis. All right, so you're going to use this axis tool, which is shortcut L, and you're going to use your snaps and your quantizing to be able to set your position for that axis. And the quick way to grab snapping points is hit V and then hover over the snaps, and then we should definitely use vertex snap. And like if we wanted to move this to a different vertex, it'll snap to that vertex for this one, so on and so forth. So we could do that. And maybe for walls, I usually leave it at the center point of the wall, but you could move it to the inside surface of the wall. And now disable that, and we can move that 10 centimeters. And now you see why the quantizing is very handy. Okay. Okay, so let's pretend we wanted to make a window in this wall. It's going to be one of the basic functions that you're going to want to do. You can select the wall, and there are two ways. You're obviously going to want to try your Boolean. So let's pretend we wanted to make a Boolean. We'll just pop in a box here, and we go to this plan view. I want it in the middle of our wall, so we're at wall 1 midpoint. And now in the front view, we're going to move it up, and we want this window to be, I'm looking over here right now, so we want this window to be 120 by 120. Let's go 120 centimeters. And remember that in Blender, the up and down is actually in the Y and not in the Z. And then you have to figure out X is red and Z is blue. So in the Z direction, we also want this to be 120 because we want a square window, let's say 120 by 120. That's a typical European decent sized window, big window. And we go into our elevation view, and I'm going to move it up a little bit. So now we can actually set the position for this thing. If we move this, you can see down here, watch this number right there. If I move this, you can set the height either by looking in the viewport, but I look over there because this position is always accurate for the world. And we want the center of the window to be, let's see, the window sill. I'm gonna go ahead and hit apply on this, and I want the axis to be down at the bottom of my object so that I can now position it. I'm going to turn off the axis again. Again, the shortcut is L. And now I want this windowsill to be at 100 centimeters. Okay, so here we go, 100 centimeters above the floor. The top of the floor should be at 0. So yeah, so now we've got it accurate. So now our windowsill is at 100 centimeters, which is typical windowsill, 90 to 100 centimeters. We want to put it at 90, hit that, hit enter. And now we've got this cube, we'll call it, I'm going to call it window, let's call it window hole. Window hole. And now remember, the green ones you hold the Alt key down, and the blue ones you hold the Shift key down. Here we go, I'm going to hold, I think it's in here, Alt key down, hit bool. And the reason you're holding Alt key is now it's going to set the Boolean object axis to match the window object, the object you have selected, its axis. If I didn't do that, and I'll undo that for a second. If I unselect everything and I add a Boolean object, where is it? If I add the Boolean object, the axis is going to be at the world origin for that Boolean object. Now, if I drag the window hole into my Boolean object and drag it until I get that little down arrow, okay, so now the Boolean object is the parent and the window hole is the child. They have two different axis positions, which is annoying. So I don't want that. So I'm going to undo that, undo that, undo that. Okay, I'm going to select the window hole and I hold Alt key down and choose bool. Holding the Alt key down adds the Boolean object, but also makes the hole the axis. However, because I want this object, the main object, to be the wall, I'm going to do it opposite of that. I'm going to hit Control Z again. I'm going to choose wall 1, which is where I want this Boolean object to be. And then I'm going to hold the Alt key down so that my wall and my Boolean object have the same axis origin. And now if I select the window hole and drop it into there, it's going to subtract the one that is, it's subtracted the wall from the hole. And we want the opposite, so we're just going to drag this one up, put it in there, and now it's selected the hole from the wall. So that's the quickest way to make a Boolean subtract. And obviously if we choose this, then we can change A subtract B. You could do A union B, A intersect B, A without B. What's that? A without B, A intersect, A subtract, A union. Okay? So I think it defaults to A subtract B. So this would be A subtract B. There we go. Now if I want to draw now if I move the hole, so I've got the hole selected, window hole, and if I move that, there you go, you can see it's working. Now obviously it's making a bad mesh. It's triangulating the mesh from the corners, and that is not generally good geometry, although when you're in a hurry, this is the quickest, easiest way to make a hole in a simple object. And it's fine for rectangles, it works. Go ahead and do it. But for curving objects, doing Booleans like this is probably not the best way to go about it, not the best way to model. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to leave this here, I'm going to control drag the wall 1 out. And I'm going to hide that and disable it. So we don't have any Boolean object shown right now. Here's our wall 1. If I hide wall 1, the wall should disappear. There we go. So we're going to go to wall 1 and we're going to build that same window again, but this time we're going to, here's what I want to do. I want to drag that hole because I placed the hole, and I'm gonna use that object as a guide. So again, I'm new to Cinema 4D. I'm new to even Blender. I've only been using Blender for what, 5 or 6 months maybe. Blender has a nice loop cut tool. Cinema 4D has a garbage loop cut tool. So at least this old version of it, I have old version of Cinema 4D R17. In the newer version of Cinema 4D, the loop tool gives you a little bit more flexibility. So I'm going to go I'm going to hit enter to enter into the edit mode. I'm going to hit enter again twice to get into face mode. I'm going to hit double K to get into loop tool. And I'm going to loop cut here and loop cut here. And now I'm going to go to my front view, choose 0 for your window select, and I'm going to go to my, it says only select visible elements. We're going to turn that off, and we're going to select lines, but I can't select the lines because I'm in face mode. So click on edges mode, select those lines, and now when I move those up or down, I should be able to lock in. I'm going to hit Shift Q to undo quantizing. I only want snaps working. It should, there we go, it snaps to the hole. And here we go, I'm going to slide that down and snaps to the window hole. So now I know those are at the right height. The other option would be to just type in the height. So if I put it here, you can see the Y height over here changing. Watch this as I drag that up or down. You can see it'll snap onto that reference object that I put in there. But if that reference object wasn't there and I wanted to set the windowsill height at 90, I could just type it in right here at 90. And be sure that that only select visible elements is off, because you can see that it selected all of them. But if I was in this view and I had that turned on, only select visible elements is turned on, and I go like this, it's only going to select this front one. It doesn't select any of the others. So this now works very much like the way Blender Select works. And now we go back to this view, and I wish I could change that display. There we go. Display lines, wireframe, there we go. Okay. Now I hit KK. I'll go back into face mode, hit KK, and I can quickly throw a couple of cuts in. Hit 0 for window. Select those lines, but I can't select them. I got to hit enter twice to get into line mode. Now I can select them. Now I can drag. Quantizing is disabled, but snaps is enabled. It's snapping to my reference object. Now I can turn off my reference object, which is this window hole, by clicking on that little thing until it turns into a red light. Now I go back into perspective mode, hit 9 for live select, hit enter to get into face mode, and I should be able to, well, I've got window hole selected, that's needed wall 1 selected, and now I can select that face, hold Alt, left click to drag to orbit, hold Shift key down to add to my Alt key, hit delete on the keyboard to delete that. Okay, so now we've got our window, and now we simply need to bridge. So the best way to bridge is to use the polygon pen tool. And where is our polygon pen tool? Where is our polygon pen tool? Polygon pen. Polygon pen, there it is. ME is the shortcut. Polygon pen. Polygon pen, if you click and drag on that line and drag it to the other line, it will merge the two objects together, which is obviously not what I wanted to do. If I hold the control down and I click and drag, now it will form a bridge. So holding control down, click and drag, and it forms that bridge. Control down, click and drag, control down, click and drag. All right. Now, if you accidentally if you need to merge 2 points, because what happens in Blender, a lot of times you need to merge points by distance to kind of get rid of extra points that are laying around. You can hit Control A to select all, right click on it and choose Optimize, and it will automatically merge all the points, lines, planes that are sharing space into one object, or it should. Sometimes it doesn't really work that great, but in most cases it actually works quite good. And now we have created our window hole. Now, once you practice that several times, doing that, it goes much faster. But the first time you do it, it's going to be painful, especially coming from Blender when you're used to Blender, and the loop cut, how Blender works is great. But what about subdividing? Okay, there's a lot of things to go over, but these are the main things. Last thing, what I wanted to cover is bevels. You're going to have to bevel your objects. So let's put a windowsill, for instance, over here. I'm going to put in a windowsill right there. We're just going to put in a cube. We're going to go to front. Well, we can go to right view and go to the wall edge, and I want to get it at the midpoint snap. Now, well, Well, actually, we can just click on here and see the position is 1010 and 380. And what's our object here is, what if I do that? 10, -10, 380. Okay, and now we can drag this up. I'm holding Shift key to go into quantizing. If you have quantizing turned off, but you hold the Shift key, quantizing briefly comes on. Okay, so now we're at Y0. Now I want this windowsill at 90. I'm just hit 90. And then I'm going to drag this down. And this time, instead of looking here, because it's a parametric object, I'm looking here, and we want the windowsill to be 3 centimeters high. We know it's a 120 centimeter wide window, so it's going to be a 126 centimeter wide windowsill. So I'm going to set both of those to 126 till I find the right one. There we go. And then let's say 20 centimeters, typical windowsill in maybe in Europe, whatever. Piece of stone. Let's pretend this is a piece of stone windowsill. And we can see that now it's intersecting and it's placed properly. Now we want to add a bevel to that. So all you do, again, blue, you hold the Shift key down. Green objects here, these green transformer modifiers, you hold the Alt key down. So I'm holding the Shift key down, click on here and choose bevel. And now when I choose this bevel, you can see it's underneath this cube. I'm going to name this to sill window. And then the bevel, if I choose that, I can change the offset to be 0.1. And we can change the number of segments. Let's say 0.2. There we go. And we can change the subdivisions to, I like 6, but even 12 is even better. But you can see 6 gives you a very nice, smooth bevel. So we still have a fully quad model. And that's working on an object that is a parametric object. So that object, I can still change the depth of it. And that fillet, or that bevel, remains the same no matter what size I scale this to. You can see that it still keeps its proper dimensions. So try to keep things parametric if you don't have to move the axis for them. That seems to be working. So I'm going to set this to, if it's 20, the wall is 20 deep, so we're going to make it 26 because I want it to stick out 3 centimeters on either side. We're going to go to plan view, and we're going to make sure that this is embedded at the center of the wall. So this is the outside of the wall. I'm going to move it by holding Shift key to get into quantize mode, and I moved it 10 centimeters, and now I know that it's on both sides of that window looking good. All right, so that's how to basically get started in Cinema 4D if you are a Blender user. One thing I didn't mention is that you can have your axis locks here. If you want to move something without changing their Y or Z, you can turn those off when you have that object selected. And now if I were to just hit E to move and I just drag this, it's only going to drag it in its X. Oh wait. Oh, what's going on there? Yeah, it's only dragging in the X, I guess. No, it seems to be dragging everywhere. Oh, okay. Turn that off. And then click drag. There we go. Okay. So first you select your object. If I use the move tool or hit E for move and I drag, it's going to drag in reference to my perspective view. Control Z. But if I disable those two, it'll only move according to the X, and I don't have to touch the X gizmo. I can just click and drag and it's going to move on the X. So that's what these locks are for. Now I can click and drag and it moves on the Y. Sometimes if you can't see the axis and you're zoomed in, let's say we're to zoom in real close here, and we can't see the axis. It's now outside of our view, and we wanted to quickly adjust. We just want to tweak the movement of this thing. I can disable Y and Z, and I can just click and drag here. Whoops. I got to turn off snaps. So Shift S to turn off snaps. I have quantizing off, and now I'm only going to be moving in the X. What is happening? Okay, so if I click here, it doesn't jump anywhere. But if I'm zoomed in, why? Why is it doing this to me? What the heck? Look at that. When I click, it doesn't jump. But if I'm zoomed way in and I click, it jumps. Makes no sense at all. Anyway, it's there if you need it. Clearly, it works brilliantly. And if you have something selected and you would rather have the axis be at the world origin, you can click here, and it should align the axis to the coordinate system. Let's go into, I'm going to hit enter to enter into edit mode. I'm going to select a single edge. Selecting an edge, there we go. And now if I choose world, it flips the origin to be aligned with the world axis. Let's see, so here's a good example. If I select this edge, for some reason, the edge's default axis is on a 45-degree angle. And if I need to move that, I can't move it on the, if I wanted to move it on the world's x-axis, the x-axis is now for some reason like there. So if I hit this, it'll change it to the world orientation, and I can move it. And I can hold shift down, and it works on quantizing. All right. What else? Camera mode. So I don't have a camera in here right now, but I can add one. So if we hit just normal old camera, and we go into top view, hit S to zoom. Why is it not zooming to my selection? I don't know. Oh, because I'm not in object mode. I need to be in object mode. It's still not zooming to the camera. But anyway, here it is. So if I have my object selected, I'm going to put this at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to set the rotation to 0, 0, 0. So now my camera is pointed this way. And now if I want to enable the camera, I just click on this little button right there. And now the camera is enabled. Looks like, yeah, it's sitting right in the floor. Okay, so now if I change my perspective, now it's actually moving my camera. You can watch it move. Okay. And if I rotate this, it'll like move my camera according. Now let's say I have a good view and I want to set the pitch of the camera to 0. But you always want the pitch to be 0 because you want your verticals straight. And there we go. And I can turn off this camera. Now that camera is fixed, and now I can continue working. But you say, wait, I wanted to turn off that camera, but I still want to look through the camera. So I enable the camera, and I right-click the camera, and I choose Cinema 4D tags, protection. Now, if I try to move, it won't move my camera. Okay. Now I can click and drag and control click drag. And I can delete that tag. Just click on the tag and hit delete. and I can choose this camera, and now I can look through that camera and create my next one. So Alt right click to zoom in and out with that camera. It's actually moving the camera back and forth. Pan the camera, maybe we wanted the detail of this windowsill or something. Like that. And if I choose that camera, I can set focal length and so on and so forth with it. So field of view, if you want a wide angle lens, it's 70. I can set those both to 70. If you want to, actually, I think if you drag these things, these change these parameters as well. That's your focal depth, and this is your focal length. This is your focal distance, focus distance. So that's this number here. And this is changing the width. Yeah, okay. So there you go. Focal length, and yeah. Anywho, so that's your basic camera options. Again, make sure you put the protection tag once you have your camera set up you like, otherwise you'll end up moving your camera on accident. Then I usually just copy the camera and then I work inside the other camera, because typically then I might choose that one and I'll duplicate that. You can actually control drag that protection tag and you can drop it on another camera, and now it's protected as well. And since camera 1 is enabled with this little white box right there, I can't change it now. So I'm going to enable camera 2. I click camera 2 so that I'm changing it. And we go in and we make another view, whatever it is. Maybe it's this view. Changes to crowd. There you go. That's how you work with cameras. I mean, you can feel free to right click here and turn off this, because we'll probably not be using any animation at first. So you could just close that and close that, and then drag this down to get yourself more space. This is the material editor. If you want to create a material, you just double click in this space and you have your material. Double click on the name to rename it. Flat white, and you can change the color, whatever. There you go. So feel free to play with that and your reflectance and so on and so forth. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. To apply the material to a surface, you drag it either onto the object in your room, or you can drag it onto an object here. If you drag it onto the sweep and then you change the material on one of these others inside, the material directly on an object overrides the material on a group of some kind. Okay. Oh, okay. So let's pretend you wanted to, one more thing here. Here's the floor. We're going to call it floor. And we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to create the ceiling. So we want the ceiling to be at, let's say 280 centimeters high. But actually we want it at 300 because, yeah, okay. Now we would want to quickly change this to be 20 centimeters down, disable that, and now we'll set that up to 300. Okay, now we have a 300 centimeter high space, and let's pretend that we had our other walls. Well, I'm just gonna if you control drag a wall, you can move it. And we'll get wall 1. Where's wall 1? There it is. I'm holding control, drag there. Okay, so now we have our space complete. And now we want to make a group of all those. So we've got our profile, we've got our Boolean. That Boolean we don't care about. We're going to delete that. So I'm just going to select that object, hit delete. But the sweep is the skirt along the floor, so I'm going to call it skirt floor. And we have the windowsill. We've got these walls. I'm going to call this, because if you look in the top view, this is the bottom wall, so I'm going to call that wall south. Wall west, east, sorry. Wall 1 is wall west. This is wall north. I'm going to shift select those two, and I'm going to drag them down in order over to here. Now we've got floor, now we've got ceiling. And we've got the window hole, we've got the sill, we've got the skirt. These objects we don't need. I hit those delete. Now I can shift click all that together and hit Alt G to group them. And what that does is create something that Cinema 4D calls a null object, which just means you're creating basically an empty. I think in Blender they call it an empty. They call it a null object in C4D. And you have put them all inside that empty, and that makes it a group. So there's not really, that's how groups work in Cinema 4D. And we can call this room. So you have your room, and inside that room you've got these objects. Something you never want to do is place like this windowsill inside of the geometry of the wall. It shouldn't be like inside of wall, I think it's wall west. You don't want to place it inside. If you see these little 3 points on a triangle, that means that that is like geometry, and you don't want to put that in there. So that's bad practice. Want that outside. If you would like that grouped with the wall west, you can just control click wall west and then Alt G, and now we can call that wall west group. And inside of wall west group, now we have the windowsill and the wall. And maybe we could drop the hole in there, so just drop that into wall west group. And then you can, feel free to organize these any way you want. So I've got the wall, I've got the hole, and I've got the windowsill in that order. And that's how grouping works. So hopefully we've got everything covered so far. Okay, so last thing I would mention is once you have these things set up like this, you don't want to lose it. So you go to Window, Customization, Save Layout, or save as Startup if you're happy with it, but I'll go Save Layout, and then I will call it something. And now it's here. So I can go to that. Here's Basic Start. And here's Basic. So it has these options here. It has these options here. The other one didn't have those. So I don't like that one anymore, and I like this one. Alright, so be sure to do that. It saves you a lot of time. I didn't talk about work planes, but I don't use work planes. Work planes is for drawing directly on objects. There's obviously a lot more to learn, but this is a good, I think, starter overview if you're coming from Blender into Cinema 4D. I think maybe even SketchUp users would find this useful. All right, so hopefully that is a help and the recording worked. We'll see you next time.